Hey, welcome in.
Welcome to the Arrowhead Addict podcast.
We are here coming to you live.
Let me tell you, the dopamine, it's flowing.
I am damn excited. Damn excited.
That's a terrible drum roll. Oh!
Boy, how you doing, man? Patrick.
Will, Sterling.
Yeah.
Super Bowl champion, two-time Pro Bowler, and Trent Green. Trent Green, how you doing?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
And he picked it up! He picked it up! He's gonna score!
And we'll see you next week. But until then, as always, go Chiefs.
Welcome into the Arrowhead Addict podcast. I am Sterling Holmes, joined by Josh Brisco, JB Brisco on the X, myself at Homestretch KC. Brisco, how we doing?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing better than I've been doing for most of the last week or so. I can't remember my exact injury report for last Tuesday's episode. I think I was doing okay. Basically, Wednesday into the weekend last week was an absolute unmitigated disaster. Cough drops, nasal sprays, the whole deal. I don't know if it's just the allergies. I don't know if I had something else going on, but the vibes have recalibrated. I'm feeling good. I'm hopefully sounding better than I was at the end of last week. And so I'm on top of the world, man. We got some rookies out there running around, doing football-like activities. What else could you ask for?
By the way, just incredible from Slothy. Plot twist. They love doing mock drafts so much, they're going to do another one today.
We joked about that last week off air.
We could.
Slothy knows us. We totally could. 2026, let's go.
I mean, I would do it.
Left tackle, wide receiver, defensive end, cornerback, defensive tackle, punter. Done.
That would be absolutely horrible. I would hate that. I wouldn't be here. What I do want to do is do a succession plan, like the show Succession. Who's taking over? I don't know. I'm only in season 2, so I still have no idea. Is it going to be Roman? Is it going to be the lady with red hair? Is it going to be the guy that's creepy? I guess they're all kind of creepy, so it doesn't really matter. That could be anyone. So Succession. Which of these guys the Chiefs drafted? Who were they drafted for? Because sometimes you see a plan. Brian Cook was there for Juan Thornhill. Jaden Hicks was Justin Reed. Fairly often you'll see draft picks and you say, okay, I see where they are going to go. I see the fit. Now, it doesn't always work out. You got Wanye Morris. You thought that might be your left or right tackle. It wasn't. You got Kingsley Suamataia. You thought that was going to be your left tackle. It wasn't. So, again, they don't always pan out, but at least a lot of times you can see this semblance of a plan. So I want to go through these 7 players and, quite frankly, see where do we think they fit, not just necessarily for this season, but the long-term outlook. I don't want to always do best case scenario. I kind of do base case, if that makes sense. I don't want to sit here and say, Omarr Norman-Lott. Well, there's your Chris Jones.
Exactly. I mean, exactly right. Yes. We did not do that.
That seems a little far-fetched. That seems foolhardy. I don't want to do that. So let's do more of a base case situation. So with that in mind, let's actually start with Omarr Norman-Lott, because I think that could be...
The Josh Simmons plan is relatively well known, right? I mean, we know there's one position they want him to play, and we can just...
Well, I think we can get that in a little bit. So
okay,
he doesn't
we're just
that
going
one.
in a random order. Okay, that's okay. I thought we were just skipping Josh Simmons.
No, because I brought up Omarr Norman-Lott, and I think this is the interesting one because we already said he's not going to be Chris Jones. We know he's not going to be Chris Jones. If he is, phenomenal, but that's not the way I think the Chiefs even view this. Chris Jones is one of a kind. It's like when you draft someone. They did not draft Noah Gray to be Travis Kelce. They didn't draft Jared Wiley to be Travis Kelce because Travis Kelce is Travis Kelce. He's one of one. So for me, Omarr Norman-Lott, the easy answer, and this is why I kind of want to start here, is your Tershawn Wharton replacement. And I don't know if that's the long-term plan or if that's just the next couple year plan, next 1-2 year plan. But I think he fits in that Tershawn Wharton replacement era. Although I do think there's more upside to his game than Turk Wharton. And I mean that because I think he's starting with a higher floor than Tershawn Wharton. Very similar players, little undersized. Turk was, is he an edge? Is he a defensive tackle? Well, then he moved to defensive tackle primarily and really took off, even being undersized. Where Omarr Norman-Lott really fits in, and why I think, again, the floor is greater than when Turk Wharton started off. Omarr Lott has done it in SEC competition, playing for Tennessee, not Missouri S&T. Little difference there. Now, he hasn't played a whole bunch, but what I like about Omarr Norman-Lott, and again, even with the undersized moniker that he has been receiving, he's got a long reach. So long arms coupled with being 6'1" can almost be used as an advantage sometimes, because you know why? You have the leverage, which actually I think is an underrated part of that. That's why I think Aaron Donald, to an extent, was so good for so long. Yeah, he wasn't the biggest guy at defensive tackle. Being undersized, you actually have a little bit of leverage. So yeah, I think early on, my takeaway is Omarr Norman-Lott, Tershawn Wharton. Going forward, though, what do we see Omarr Norman-Lott as?
I may even knock him like kind of down one little peg there and mention a guy who we have not yet seen play a snap of football in a Chiefs uniform. I'm not sure he's put on a Chiefs helmet yet. I think he might be, Omarr Norman-Lott might be your Jerry Tillery replacement. And that's, I'm kind of getting into the weeds there because Jerry Tillery is sort of your short-term answer for losing Tershawn Wharton. But this is where we've talked about this a little bit in recent weeks, and I'm glad that we're doing this topic of conversation today, because I want to dig in a little more to the players who they are replacing so we can try to get a little bit of a feel for the scope of all of that. Tershawn Wharton played about, and then slightly less than, 50% of the Chiefs' defensive snaps his first 4 years in the league. Now, year 3, he was hurt, so that was he was on track to play about 50% of the snaps, and I'm not counting the games that he missed there, obviously. But he was a slightly less than half-time player until last year. He took 62% of the snaps, and then he hits free agency, he gets his big payday, and he moves on. I think the Chiefs would take Tershawn Wharton's career for Omarr Norman-Lott, and I do think that his trajectory is one that you want to give an extra year to, that you don't necessarily want it to push him into the heavy rotation right now as a guy who was in a relatively light rotation in college, which he talked about this over the weekend in his minicamp presser, but that he thought there were, I think, 6 starting caliber defensive tackles in the SEC on that defensive line, himself included. So his number gets low that way. But ultimately, again, if he has Tershawn Wharton's career, I think the Chiefs would be happy. I think I'd probably be happy with that. It's also tough, though, because Tershawn Wharton was doing it as a UDFA for Missouri S&T, so his value is off the charts. Maybe the Chiefs have higher hopes than that for Omarr Norman-Lott, but I think this year is going to be about Jerry Tillery bridging that gap, and then you hope that Omarr Norman-Lott can take that role to some extent. 40% snap count would be pretty nice, I would say, in his second season.
Yeah. I guess where I'm coming from is, one, that's a sunk cost of where they were drafted at this point. They're on your team. So if he can give you 8.5 sacks like Tershawn Wharton did, doesn't matter if you're a second rounder or UDFA, 8.5 sacks at that, specialized DT pass rushing role. That is very, very valuable. So I think that's
6.5 last year for Wharton. Just to
6.5. I don't know why I thought it was 8.5.
6.5 last year. Well, so this is kind of, and maybe I don't know. I'm just looking at Pro Football Reference. That, you know what? Maybe you're counting. Did he have 2 in the playoffs? He did. So including the playoffs, it was 8.5.
Okay.
Which the sacks in the playoffs do count according to my general note taking. So 8.5, well deserved. He had 2-2-1-2 in the years prior. Again, the one there was the year he got hurt after 5 games. The question for me is, does Omarr Norman-Lott get there quicker than Tershawn Wharton did? Because I'm with you again, and even it's weeks after the draft. I'm not in sunk cost territory yet because we're still evaluating the process, right? Like, how did they get there? And I'm not hurt about it. I was hurt about Clyde Edwards-Helaire for a month. That took me a while. None of this is that. None of this. Omarr Norman-Lott was a little bit of a quote value reach, but we talked about this last week. Not in a way that I'm in any way aggravated about right now. But if Norman-Lott is not that guy until year 5, he might be doing that in year 5 for somebody else. Or he's back on a 1-year deal like that, and you get 1 more year of him before he hits free agency. So if Omarr Norman-Lott has a sack or 2 this year, and then 3 or 4 the next, and then 5 or 6, and then 7 and 8, that is a fabulous, fabulous pick. And that's a high case scenario, I would argue. But that's to me where it gets difficult. It's not really about Wharton being an undrafted free agent. It's about Wharton taking that time to blossom as an NFL player, which makes total sense given where he started from. The Chiefs, you are asking Norman-Lott to do that a little more quickly.
Yeah, that's what it comes down to. Is I think he can be Tershawn Wharton, but quicker.
Yep.
Again, starting from a higher place. The first few years won't be 1-2-2 or whatever it is. It'll be more hoping of like a 3-5-7.
Yep.
3-4-6, something along those lines. Let's go to Josh Simmons now. Josh Simmons, the obvious answer is left tackle. I assume that's what it's going to be. But what if Jalen Moore does a really nice job? Especially this year.
Great. Yeah. What if he's great this year?
That's kind of my point is, what if we see Jalen Moore look like a top 12 left tackle this year? That kind of 8 to 12 range, 10 to 12, above average, to where you go, do we really want to move him off for the unknown that is Josh Simmons, right? I almost question, okay, well, do they still just say, we had this in place, let's see if he can on the right side, and Josh Simmons is still a left tackle? Or would they consider moving Josh to the right side? I know Brett Veach, technically Jawan Taylor has 2 years left in his contract, but Brett Veach made it fairly clear. He goes, he's at the tail end of his contract because they can get out of it after this season. Are we almost assuming maybe too much that Josh Simmons is just going to be the left tackle? Or is there a situation where we see Jalen Moore have a really good year and he runs with it?
This might be bold, because this isn't an exact prediction for what Josh Simmons would do with a starting job. Okay. I'm not saying this is what Simmons is going to turn into, but I think Jalen Moore would have to have something close to an all-pro type of season to make that question as big as it is right now in this situation, in this hypothetical. I think if Jalen Moore is a top 5 left tackle, if you go, man, like if that is a topic of conversation, that Jalen Moore was the biggest, most underrated signing of the offseason, that he came in and he single-handedly went from giving the Chiefs terrible left tackle play to really, really top tier left tackle play, then yeah, I could see that. And at that point, I guess you're probably asking Simmons to play right tackle in his second year. The reason I have that standard so high, though, is because you do have 5, really 6 years with Josh Simmons of like team control, the 5th-year option, the franchise tag. You know what his cost. I know he signed his deal. I imagine the life of his contract, his rookie contract, is slightly less than Jalen Moore will make over the next year and a half. Or I think Jalen Moore's guaranteed money. I think it's kind of in that same ballpark. And he's younger, and he's the guy with the higher ceiling. So I think the Chiefs really, really, really want Josh Simmons to be their starting left tackle week 1 of 2026. I think there's a chance that they're going to let him push for it sooner than that. But I'll tell you what, man, long answer with an easy final button. Good problem. If that's the case, good problem. If Jawan Taylor is great and has no penalties in 2025, he just looks like the machine they were hoping they were signing in free agency. Good problem, man. You can restructure or renegotiate with him and say, you know what, Jawan, you just gave us the best ball you've shown us so far. Here's 2 years. We're going to make this number work out. The Chiefs have not had a problem of having too many good tackles in my lifetime, probably. Well, that's not entirely true.
Yo, but come on now. Let's get back to 03.
You're right. No. You're right. I was cutting off my lifetime there, air quotes, way too early. Andy Reid's Chiefs have never had too many good tackles. So I would welcome that. It's kind of an interesting one, but I think Josh Simmons is still most likely either a top 15 starting left tackle or not a guy who's like physically fit to play NFL football. I still think those are kind of the 2 branching paths.
Yeah, I'm actually with you. I'd be surprised if he plays and he's bad.
Yes, right. Steve Cashman in the chat says $14 million fully guaranteed 4 years for Simmons. So yeah, I mean, that's Jalen Moore is going to make 20-something this year. Jawan Taylor's making 20-something this year. And then, of course, again, if it's a 5th-year option and a franchise tag, that would increase Simmons' number way down the line. But I just think that's plan A, B, and C.
Yeah, I guess for me, 100% with you. I understand. I don't know if we're undervaluing or glossing over Jalen Moore too much. That's kind of my point. I also think now, especially, not only was he sitting behind Trent Williams for as long as he did, he finally gets this contract. He's like, wow, I get a start. I get to protect Patrick Mahomes. I'm still on a winner. Actually a better winner than San Fran. But San Fran, for the most part of his career, there was pretty good outside of last year.
Winning franchise,
team.
sure.
And I guess part of me is just in here going, I could see him coming out and being really motivated because he didn't get the Dan Moore contract.
Right.
He's been behind a guy for 5 or so. How long? He's 27, probably 4 years in San Fran.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, I guess I might be putting too much value and stock into he's got something to prove, but all of a sudden he finally gets to where he thinks he's the starter for at least a year or two in KC and maybe can parlay that into something bigger. Then the only thing that people are talking about is the rookie left tackle with a torn patellar tendon, and it's not even him anymore. So I'm sitting here going, I don't know if I want to just count out Jalen Moore. That I guess maybe I'm, again, reading too much into that.
I think Jalen Moore is going to be the starting left tackle this year. I think that's not a guarantee, but I think that's the most likely outcome. And I think the Chiefs' best case scenario is that he's their starting right tackle in 2026. And he and Simmons have both played some right tackle. Obviously, they were both brought to the Chiefs to fix the left tackle problem. But again, I'm cool with the double dip there. And I think, to your point, maybe that is the battle that is the least succession plan-y and is more just like, let's get some competent tackle options and then break the pool stick over our knee and throw it in the room and tell them to come out with 2 winners. I think it's a slightly different strategy because I don't think that Jalen Moore he wasn't a long-term answer on the deal that he signed, but he was a tall enough to ride the roller coaster type of guy, which the Chiefs obviously didn't have for the vast majority of last year.
Let's go to the 7th round. Let's go to Brashard Smith because I think this is an interesting one. You know my thoughts on him. I've talked about it. I said there's going to be a Pro Bowler, the first one to be a Pro Bowler from this draft class. I think it's Brashard Smith as a returner, special teamer, but I still think that's a value, especially in the 7th round. I think he's going to be so damn good, especially with the new modified kickoff rules. With basically, you're going to see a lot more balls in play. You have a running back vision with the RB wide receiver athleticism, because again, of course, he moved wide receiver to running back. I just think the value of Brashard Smith on special teams is going to be drastic early on for Casey. They're going to love that. When it comes to the succession plan of him, this is an interesting one because I don't think it's going to be like Pacheco. I don't think it's going to be, like early Kareem Hunt, his first tenure in Kansas City. I see it as a Jerick McKinnon.
Yeah, not a succession plan by definition, but also what I was going to say.
Is that unfair? Are we underselling it? Is he a guy that maybe could, maybe Elijah Mitchell when he was first in San Fran before the injuries, but we don't really know because he didn't, he didn't play a ton because of injury. Like where I just don't know where he fits long term as far as the pecking order of, is he going to be a guy who takes 15, 20 touches a game?
I think any Chiefs fan at this point should and probably does have the right attitude with a Jerick McKinnon comp, which is to go, oh man, well, if he does what Jerick McKinnon did, that's great. And it would be. Jerick McKinnon was remarkably important to this offense in a way that I don't think he always gets quite enough credit for. He doesn't have quite the Damian Williams moment and impact and volume, I guess, because Williams was more of like the guy during that chunk of the run. But no, Smith is the funny one to me because if we were just talking, I think we may have done this last week too, but if we're just asking who's going to have the biggest impact as a rookie, who may have the least amount of time to wait in the succession plan, I could argue it's him. Because I think the role for him is available because, again, as I joked, like definitionally not a succession. Jerick McKinnon hasn't been here since 2023 and it wasn't healthy since most of 2022. If you, I guess he was the first half of 2023 makes that comeback. I mean, who didn't love Jerick McKinnon? But he's not here, and I think Elijah Mitchell is the bandage over that, and a totally reasonable veteran to bring in, see if he's healthy, see if he's explosive, see him in training camp, ask the same questions to Kareem Hunt. Very different players, similar questions. Where's your health? Where's your juice? And I think Smith is going to have both of those answers immediately. He is healthy. He is young. He is the only running back in this room with significant contract time, like under his name, other than Carson Steele, who I don't think can be feeling anything resembling safe on this roster at this point. Right now, on the wrong side of the bubble, frankly. I think he has a path to play as a rookie, and I think he has a path to continue playing throughout this rookie deal in a way where it would be a success with him never starting. Maybe not ever starting a game, but like I'm not saying Brashard Smith ever needs to be this team's starting running back. I think you need somebody that has juice behind Isaiah Pacheco and a different skill set. Kareem Hunt doesn't have the juice. He has reliability. Elijah Mitchell has some juice, doesn't have reliability. This to me is truly building a room for this offense. And I really like how it's coming together.
Yeah, I'm almost thinking of a little different player, but what Washington did was it Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler last year?
Yeah, that's kind of fun.
Again, a little different because he's more explosive than Eckler, but a little bit of they're in a split time, different style of players.
Yeah.
Even Tank Bigsby and Trevor Etienne in Jacksonville, though Etienne, I don't really know exactly what happened. He's somewhat fallen off.
Are there 5 running backs in the NFL at this point who aren't in a situation like that? I don't know that there are. And the Eagles were having success with a build like that, and they brought in Saquon.
I was going to say almost like a Jalen Warren with Najee Harris in Pittsburgh originally. Like that might be a fun comp too of Jalen Warren, where he's not your every down guy. Although again, in Pittsburgh, we'll see this year. I still don't think he'll be an every down guy, but they moved on from Najee. Yeah, man, I guess maybe Jalen Warren's a fun comp. I think that could be a fun comp. And I like this because this is what Joshua said in the chat. I see Brashard as some of the empty package stuff in the RB role, how they motion him around. Yeah, and that's what the Steelers did actually with Jalen Warren. That's how he eventually got on the field more than Najee was. They go, oh, wow, this guy's a great pass catcher. What if we just open him up and have him out wide with a linebacker on him? What's going to happen? And it's great.
The other side of that coin, because I think that's good, but Steve Cashman makes the point in the chat, he'll be selling hot dogs the first time he gets Pat blown up. That's the other thing about being like a, quote, third down back where Jerick McKinnon was ready to die for Patrick Mahomes. In a way, and sometimes he did, and then rose from the dead again. It was amazing. You've also got to be ready to do that. Hey, converted wide receiver, are you ready for a 250-pound linebacker coming up the A-gap? That's your responsibility, buddy. Get down. Like, that is another element of the position. And again, for me, that's in a place. I know you don't want to tip your hand to the defense too aggressively. Brashard Smith is in there. He's going out for a route. He is not staying in to pass protect. He is not taking a handoff. Or Kareem Hunt is out there. Like, here's a run up the gut for 3. You obviously don't want to dictate too clearly with your personnel what you're going to do. But if I'm in this position as an NFL GM right now, I'm happier with the Chiefs' strategy than I would be with them just trying to like trading the whole draft to go take Genty and be like, well, we won our Saquon. Well, Saquon is the Eagles Saquon because they built a really good running game before he got there and then added a generational talent. The Chiefs don't have that running game. There wasn't a generational talent like that available. Give me a diverse skill set in my running back room, and let's see what Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes do with it. I like it.
Yeah. Let's go to Jalen Royals next. Wide receiver, Jalen Royals. What is his succession plan, and what's it look like? For me, I think the obvious early answer is Rashee Rice. Whenever Rashee Rice misses games, I think Royals fits that role. I think it's a easy plug and play. Maybe easy's unfair because what Rice did is so damn impressive. Yeah. I mean, like, it's funny because he's heading into his second to last year on the rookie contract.
Yes,
and
2 years left in 2025.
We still kind of have a unknown next to Rice because we've seen him look great and we've also seen him injured or potentially upcoming suspended. We won't know how many games he's going to play. Who knows? Maybe he gets suspended next year instead of this year. Did you make that?
I did. I make them all.
Okay. You made it in your room. You didn't actually have a trash can over there. Brisco blew his nose and threw a Kleenex. He actually didn't even have a trash can over there. He just throws it in his room and says, made it.
Made it. It's actually perfect. I have a little cart that has a whole bunch of my diabetes nonsense. I put my trash can on top of that so the dogs can't get into it. And then Renee bought me a clip-on backboard for the trash can. So as I've had all of I've got my Costco-sized box of tissues over here. Blow my nose, pull up, 3, bank them. I'm shooting like 90%.
Yeah, at soft you bank it, swish only.
I'd take what I can get better than getting up and having to pick it up off the ground.
Tough but fair. All right. So Jalen Royals, where do you see him? Again, I think the early answer, the obvious answer is Rashee Rice when he's suspended, but is he going to be more of the Juju where he's, are you going to say this year or last year's Juju where he's that intermediary guy who's also, a great blocker. He's going to do the dirty work for you. Is he going to be the Hollywood replacement after 1 year where the Chiefs say, hey, we don't want to pay Hollywood because we just drafted Jalen Royals? Someone different, is he, where do you see Jalen Royals in the succession plan?
The one name you didn't mention that I want to throw out there is actually Justin Watson, not because they're remarkably similar players or are going to be used the exact same way, but I can't remember who originated this phrase. I'm sorry, I always steal it without being able to credit who came up with the term, but it wasn't even about Justin Watson. But at times last year, over the last couple of years, Justin Watson has been the Chiefs' sacrificial X, the receiver who's out over there to make sure that somebody's defending the backside of the play, but that's not a threat necessarily. DeAndre Hopkins obviously brought you a little bit of that energy, but he wasn't quite the guy you needed him to be to pull that off last year. And then Travis Kelce has been this team's best X receiver for a decade, but that changing of the guard is happening now. So I think that in terms of where that usage comes and how he gets used, that the Chiefs don't really use a traditional X receiver. I don't know that Jalen Royals is a traditional X anyway. There's not another one on this roster, though. So I could see him taking on a little more of that Juju role going in the next year. I assume this is his last year in Kansas City, probably the last year for Hollywood. We'll see how that pans out, I guess. There's always an option for either of those guys. But I am giving Jalen Royals less to do if possible. I like him as a player. It was the most excited I was to see a name pop up, at least in day 2 or day 3 of the draft. I thought, well, it'd be pretty sweet if they take Jalen Royals here. They probably won't. Hey, I was down, man. I like it a lot. I think it's a smart investment. But I think it's probably Juju next year, a little bit of what Justin Watson was doing. And I don't know that we'll see him much if Rice is either suspended or injured for the beginning of the season, because now you're asking that rookie receiver to step up the first 4 weeks of the year, whatever that may be. That's really hard in the best of circumstances in Andy Reid's offense. So I really like his investment. I would say that he's maybe somewhere between Jeffrey Bassa, who has a very, very clear succession plan, who we'll talk about, I'm sure, and Brashard Smith, who's a little less succession planning and more just wise investment for the future. If Jalen Royals is good, he will find a role.
Yeah. Buck and Bob take on Chiefs Kingdom podcast. First time tuning in. I freaking love Sterling's voice. Great radio voice. Thank you.
Thanks, Buck and Bob.
I also love this mic. You can tune in Sports Radio 810 every single day, Monday to Friday, 10 to 2 p.m.
I do need maybe just a bassier microphone. Maybe that'd be my problem. Need to up my Jeffrey Bassa levels.
Was that pick your Bassa Nova?
No, but
Casanova, but
yeah. No, that's good. No, it wasn't, but I was able to stay tranquil about it.
Okay. Let's just go into it.
And you to call it truce.
Yeah,
shake on it, truce.
All right. Okay. By the way, I think Royals, Justin Watson, the next year or two is a really good call. I don't want to say Hollywood because we don't really know what he was in this offense outside of a couple games where Hollywood was fairly efficient, where he was almost the guy, but that was also without Rashee Rice. So it's a little difficult to figure out the role of Royals. Maybe it is a little bit of Juju Smith-Schuster in first time around in this offense, a little bit.
You know what? I don't hate that. That's not bad. Yeah. The slightly fresher, springier knee to Juju.
I like it.
Yeah, I do too.
I like it. All right, Jeffrey Bassa. The
Chiefs PR said Bassa leading into his
Bassa
availability, but other people have been telling me it's Bassa. You know what I'm gonna call him? JB.
Jeffrey.
Jeff Bass.
I'm a big JB
Jeff
guy.
Bass.
He's gonna bring the bass or
Jeffrey
the bass.
Bezos. No,
Or the bass. Guy. I don't know.
It's tough.
So this might be the easiest one. Maybe not, but it's one of the easier ones. Drew Tranquil.
Yep.
I know people have said Willie Gay Jr. Okay, I see.
I have a straight counter argument for that whenever you want it. You just let me know.
My counter argument was Willie Gay Jr. was more athletic and he was bigger. Like Willie Gay Jr. was an athletic specimen.
And a second round pick. And that's actually, I have a pro Bassa argument that you haven't mentioned yet.
My concern with Bassa, Jeffrey, Dorian O'Daniel. Yeah. That's my one concern. The regime has changed. The linebacker room has changed a lot, right? You know, if Dorian O'Daniel had Leo and Drew and Nick Bolton, all those guys here, it's going to be a little easier for Dorian, right? Maybe he pans out differently. But with Jeffrey here, he's got a good group of linebackers to work with. His role is going to be fairly specialized, especially early on. I think he's always going to struggle. I don't want to say always in the run game because of his size, a la little Drew Tranquil. But him and Nick Bolton, you can really see having a long-term future in Kansas City because they should complement each other very, very well. Should and will, two different stories. But I think for me, your hope is that he's Drew Tranquil. If he is Drew Tranquil, even 90%, maybe not last year, but the year prior, the first year in Kansas City, I think you'd be absolutely ecstatic, especially for a fifth-round draft pick on a rookie contract. I think Drew, to me, is the obvious one for Jeffrey.
I think you're right about the Willie Gay comp. Willie Gay was a higher pick because he was an absolute physical anomaly. Like, that man out of the draft was such a unique set of tools. Dorian O'Daniel was a later pick. I think DOD also may have been a better, more impressive athlete than our dear friend Jeffrey B. I'm going to make an argument on Bassa's behalf here, and I'm going to draw you a picture. We're going to play Pictionary. You ready, Stu? I'm going to draw, and then you're going to guess what it is, okay? Ready? Now, what's that?
That's a dot. It's a great dot.
It's a green dot. And that's the thing that Willie Gay never did. And the thing that, honestly, from the outside, the thing that Spags never trusted Willie Gay to do. Not just like have the green dot and communicate that way, but never asked him, never relied on him to be thinking a step ahead. Willie Gay had pretty good instincts and incredible athleticism, but he was not the type of linebacker that the Chiefs valued. I can say that confidently because he got a pretty small deal from the New Orleans Saints, and the Chiefs let him walk, and they signed Drew Tranquil. Another guy who is not as physically talented. I mean, he's incredibly physically gifted, but like, you know what I mean? And compared to Willie Gay, compared to Superman, but compared to Willie Gay, Drew Tranquil was a downgrade in physicality, a downgrade as a run stuffer, but of course, confident with putting Tranquil in coverage, even as he took a step back a little bit last year. I've also got something I hadn't really realized about Tranquil. I was in that headspace of this is clearly his final year. The funny thing about his contract is next year, they could cut him, and it would be $1.5 million in dead cap space. That's no biggie. His cap hits 7.5 next year. It's 8.5 this year. It actually goes down in year 3. So as opposed to like Mike Dana's deal, where I think it's over after this one, we can double check on that in a minute when we get more into the defensive line. But I think, and I don't know if you listened to the presser from, I can't remember if he talked Saturday or Sunday, Bassa. You listen to him talk, and you would be forgiven for Venn diagram confusing him a little bit with Justin Reed and Nick Bolton. Not the football players, right? Those guys are incredibly good football players making millions, tens of millions of dollars. But in the way that he talks, and I think in the way that he seems to understand football from the outside, it's very hard to know. But the converted safety who by all means appears to be a gifted communicator in the speed of the game and all that, we disagreed on the Nick Bolton deal and all of those things, but I've at least had my eyes open long enough to realize what Steve Spagnuolo values. If you can't do the mental things he's asking you to do, you're going to have a very hard time getting on the field, which I think was largely Willie Gay's problem, even while he played a lot because he was still really good at football. But if you have a couple of those limitations, but you're always where you want him to be, and like he talked about in his presser, you're a guy that can go cover a tight end on third down, That's a really, really valuable football player. And maybe there's a world in which he's not taking over for Tranquil fully until 2027. But this is dangerous because you don't draft for press conferences, but I felt even better about Bassa after the presser, largely just thinking like, I bet Spags loves this dude.
Yeah, I was so impressed with his presser. Him and Ashton Gillotte, which we'll get to in a little bit of just a moment here. But man, JB, when he spoke, you're right. It reminded you of Justin Reed. And I was
Richard,
laughing.
can we cut that and make it sound like it was about me? Thank you.
I was laughing going, who's going to take over with Reed gone? Who's going to be the defensive guy who speaks and on coordinator days and all that stuff? And I'm like, is it going to be a rookie? Is it going to be is it going to be a rookie?
It might be Jaden Hicks, honestly, another guy who fits that bill pretty good.
I just feel like him and Nick Bolton.
Yeah.
And you're right with Spags loving students of the game. And as Steve says, this is why Hitchens stuck around. Smart, even with Hitchens' physical decline, which I will always say Hitchens, I think, got a little bit of a raw end, maybe reputation-wise. I'm not saying he was good, but he was the best of the worst group. And he was like the only named guy. And so it was just, well, the linebacker sucks, so Hitchens sucks.
He's
and
also
I'm like,
Juwan Taylor of like a free agent signing they brought in that had to overpay when you kind of know at the time. That feels like an overpay.
Yeah, and so we don't need to get into that conversation. But I liked Hitchens' intelligence, just even if the physical traits obviously completely left him. He never played another snap, I don't think, after his final year in Kansas City, which is crazy to think about. But you hear Jeffrey talk, and you talk about the intelligence and how he was breaking down all this film, and that is exactly what Nick Bolton. I mean, we're talking to Nick Bolton in the Super Bowl. I think it was 2 years ago at the Super Bowl, and he was talking how he used to break down film of like Pee Wee football with his dad. Like, he's just such a student of the game. And again, Spags values that. But with Spags and Jeffrey Bassa, if they can get it together and it works, those two guys with the intelligence level is going to be so enjoyable. And the amount of situations and different looks that Spags can roll because of the intelligence is going to be really fun to watch. So again, yeah, maybe he's not as athletic as Willie Gay Jr., but I do think that he might be able to pick it up and maybe do a little bit more in this particular defense than Willie Gay Jr. was able to do.
And here, I'll give you one thing so far in advance that it's silly. He's going to be one of the guys I want to watch in the preseason, because it wouldn't surprise or upset me if Jeff Bassa plays linebacker 4 snaps. They're in the regular season, right? Like, new defense and all of that is as smart as he seems to be. I am assuming that this entire coaching staff on really both sides of the football, maybe Dave Tobe on the third side too, I'm assuming they're going to take the vet in a tie. But I wonder if they'll give him the green dot and let him play Mike in the second, third quarter of these preseason games, just to try to get him to let Spags get into his ear and see if he can do some of that stuff. Because God knows Nick Bolton and Drew Tranquil can probably go ahead and hit a couple dudes in week 1 of the preseason and then show up for the kickoff. But he'll be a fun guy to keep an eye on. I really hope it works out, because man, I fell in love with Dorian O'Daniel and I got hurt.
Yeah. Let's go with we'll finish with Gillotte. We'll finish with him. So we'll go with Nohl Williams next. Nohl Williams, cornerback. Love his draft pick, even if there's a lot of pressure on Nohl, because it is basically the Joe Thuney trade, right? If we're saying it that way, he actually is replacing Joe Thuney.
It's Joe Thuney and a third for Nohl Williams, which is a pretty crummy way to frame it for Nohl Williams and the Chiefs, because there's a Hall of Famer and a rookie. But I like this rookie.
I like the pick overall. I like the player. And I find myself going back and forth. Is it a Jalen Watson replacement? Is it a Christian Fulton replacement? Which I think you could view it as a Christian Fulton replacement as well. This might be too bullish. And I'm going back a little bit here.
Don't say it.
Travarius Ward replacement.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Trip McDuffie replacement.
No. I would never say
Sterling,
that.
no. That's as far as I can come with you, bud. This has been a good show. I got to go.
Very different player than Travarius Ward.
Yeah.
But I don't expect Christian Fulton to be a pseudo wide receiver or a CB1 as well. Mm-hmm. Like, the Chiefs for a long time had 2 CB1s. It was Travarius and Legarius. And then it was Legarius and Trent. Like, they had 2 CB1s.
And for a few weeks last year, felt like they did again.
Yeah, with Watson, right?
Re-injury.
Yeah. It's a good call. So I'm almost wondering, like, I have really high expectations for Nohl Williams. Different style of play, but can he be it's tough because we never saw Jalen Watson really do it as a CB1 level for a long period of time. We haven't seen Christian Fulton in this defense, so maybe all of a sudden he turns back the clock into what we all thought he was going to be coming out of college. That could be the case. I just have really high expectations, even if the play style is so much different than Treverius. Treverius is like, I'm not letting you get by me. I'm not going to look at the ball probably. I'm not going to knock it away. You're just not going to catch it because I am all over you. So good luck. Nohl Williams is like, okay, I'm going to look at the ball though too. I might get a step behind you because I'm trying to play the quarterback. I might try and do something a little different here. It's not quite Marcus Peters. Marcus Peters was more of a gambler, right? I don't think Nohl Williams, and I'm not saying that in a bad way. I think there's certain cornerbacks who have different play styles.
Marcus Peters was incredibly smart with incredible football IQ and a gambler.
Yes. Yes.
He was seeing things so much better than anyone gives him credit for, and a little bit of a gambler.
Professional gambler. He was a
Yes.
definition of a professional gambler.
He was Chris Moneymaker, dude.
So I don't know the exact replacement or succession of what Nohl Williams is going to be. I almost want to say Treverius Ward because that would give you, again, the quote-unquote 2 CB1s. I think it's a higher upside pick and maybe even a higher floor than Jalen Watson. Again, part of that is because of all the injuries that Watson has sustained. So I find myself, and I've saw it in the chat as well, I wouldn't be surprised if it was Williams, Fulton, and McDuffie by week 6 as your starting cornerbacks with McDuffie in the slot. You know, I get Watson's going to be back and he's going to be healthy, and I'm hoping for the best for him, but the amount of injuries he has sustained, and we can't necessarily count on him to play 17 regular season games plus the playoffs. If that's the case, I think you could see a lot of Williams early on, or maybe even as the season progresses. I'm just very enamored by what I think Williams could be.
I am too, which is why that's an important pretext for the player that I think this is a succession plan for, is a player who I have very high expectations for in 2026, and that is, or in 2025, excuse me, and that is Jalen Watson. I actually would be surprised if Nohl Williams is starting over Jalen Watson outside of an injury, and if there is an injury, welcome back to another episode of Good Problems. Now, this football team has the best slot defender in football, who's also an excellent outside defender, a player in Jalen Watson who was looking like a burgeoning cornerback 1 type of outside guy last year. Christian Fulton, who I just really think feels like such a hand and glove fit for this defense, for Spags, for Dave Merritt. I am drinking the Kool-Aid on the cornerback group more so than any other position group on this team right now, I think, because it is significantly better than it was the way we remember it last year, because it's been improved at 3 spots from what you remember last year, not just you, but what we all remember from last year. I go, quick, think about Chiefs cornerbacks in 2024. You go, oh yeah, okay, so Trent McDuffie's there, playing pretty good football and occasionally giving up a touchdown, that's wild, and occasionally getting a pick, even crazier. And then Joshua Williams and Najee Johnson, and I think some Keith Taylor in there, and some Chris Roland Wallace. I think Jalen Watson is in a contract year, first of all. I think Jalen Watson is in position to make himself a lot of money this year. I think he knows that. I think his health is absolutely a part of that. And if he is banged up and maybe it's a 1-year deal to return to the Chiefs and try to get another shot at it next season, I'd be cool with that too. But I think Christian Fulton is such a good fit. I really do think Jalen Watson's going to look more like he did pre-injury than post last year. And if he misses time, your break glass in case of emergency corner was one of the most fun corners in college football last year. A guy who also seems like a really good tradesy fit here. I could see him clearly being on that Jaden Hicks type of deal where you say, hey man, just get used to the speed of the game. Let Spags and Dave Merritt teach you everything they can for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10, 12. Jaden Hicks saw more snaps at the very end of the regular season and into the playoffs than he had through the first, I think, 2/3 of the year, really. I think Nohl Williams has a role on this team, but I think Christian Fulton and Jalen Watson are both in really good positions to have really nice seasons, which is, once again, a fabulous problem. And then I think Watson, if he does have that year, he's going to get paid by somebody else in free agency. Christian Fulton will go into a contract year with Kansas City. Nohl Williams becomes effectively another starter. 3 corners are starters, even if they're not, So I love the lineup. I love the pick. I think it's all very, very good. I'm just finding myself a little bit compared to you, a little bit compared to the chat. I'm buying a Jalen Watson contract year a little more than most maybe, because I think it really all aligns. I certainly hope he stays healthy. He played through the injury he could physically play through that a lot of guys couldn't. I think he's tough. I think he knows the defense. I think that unit is going to be really, really fun this year.
Yeah. And let's go with the final one, Ashton Gillotte. Obviously, edge out of Louisville. The obvious comp he's been getting is Karlaftis for multitude of reasons. His head coach coached at Purdue when Karlaftis was there, and then he went to Louisville and coached Gillotte, and he even spoke how there's a lot of similarities between the two. His presser was awesome, giving the majority of his NIL money to veterans and the homeless. It's a guy that really gets you. You listen to Ashton Gillotte speak, and I was kind of touched. Honestly, I was kind of, I mean, it's a guy that gets it, that understands there's more to life than just football. And he talked about how, his NIL, he's like, I don't need like any of this stuff. Yeah. I'm doing fine. Let me help someone else. His dad was a Marine, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
I can't remember. He was in the military to some extent. I think he said he thought he was going to end up being a Marine or maybe even being a SEAL.
I thought it was a Navy.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think his dad and I think he said his uncle were both in the military, and Herbie Teope, former. I don't know if former is the right word or not. Actually, I don't want to step on the terminology, but Herbie, a serviceman, he asked a couple of follow-ups there, and I thought it was interesting where Herbie asked Gillotte if he was if he ever thought that maybe that would be in his future, and he said his dad told him, no, I did that. You're not going to, unless it is your last option, go chase football. And now he's had a lot of success already in football, and he's already used that to make some good. Yeah, very, very cool. I'm right with you. I'd heard a little bit of that when they drafted him, that he had sort of like an NIL donation kind of thing, but hearing him talk about it in his own words was pretty neat.
And he's talked about giving back even the local community more. It was a guy that you easily can root for, really get behind, rally behind. Yeah, it's almost like when Derek Nottie and the Dogs. Right.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm getting behind. That's awesome. This is amazing. Just for the military. So I'm rooting very, very hard for Ashton Gillotte. I don't know where he fits year one.
Yeah.
Year one, I still think he's behind FAU. I know some people will probably disagree with that, but
he's starting behind FAU, right? Right now, he's behind FAU, clearly.
Because I think Karlaftis is going to play the 90% of snaps like he normally does, right? That Karlaftis is just ridiculous. Mike Dana is going to have his role because he's a very valuable role player. FAU, I still think, takes a decent step forward because I'm buying in on the age and what we saw last year in flashes. We saw no consistency from FAU. But he was never given the reign to have consistency. It was always flashes, but he flashed about once or twice a game. And you're like, wow, how many snaps did he play? 6, 5. Yeah. And you're like, well, I don't know. I don't know what to make of that. And obviously Charles Omenihu being back, which I don't think is necessarily a shot at FAU or Mike Dana or anyone. It was, wow, that's a good contract. Why would we not bring back a good player on a good deal? This makes sense for both parties, by the way, but it makes a lot of sense for KC. So in that regard, I don't think that says as much about FAU or Dana as some people might play it out to be. So I think year one, I don't really see what he's going to be. I don't think he's a Karlaftis replacement. I think he's an Omenihu replacement. Different style of player.
I think I'll tell you what, I'll just meet you halfway and tell you, I think it's a Mike Dana replacement, and it can be a little column A, a little column B.
But that's not a halfway, because I think Mike Dana is saying he is strictly a rotational piece. Right? I think that's
Omenihu has been a rotational piece here, but I understand where you're getting at. You're projecting Omenihu 2025.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm projecting the starter role because you're right. Technically, Mike Dana has actually been probably listed as a starter way more games than Charles Omenihu has. But I think if you asked most people who's the more impactful player on a snap-by-snap basis, well, you'd say Charles Omenihu. I think that's the answer. At least that's the answer I would say. Oh, so yeah, I don't think it's just a Dana replacement. I think it's more so than that. Okay. I think it's a guy who plays like Dana, plays like Karlaftis, but has the talent of a Karlaftis right? It's not a knock on Mike Dana, but he was a 5th-round draft pick, and that at the time seemed like a reach. I mean, a lot of people said he was a 7th-rounder or a UDFA guy. I remember me at the time saying, wow, that seems perplexing to draft him in the 5th round. I mean, it feels like he was on no one's draft boards. And then we saw what he has done, and it's been a really nice career for Mike Dana. Glad he's back. But I think you're looking at a starter, and I don't think the Chiefs will move on from Karlaftis. I think they'll try and find a way to keep him here, so I don't want to say he's a Karlaftis replacement, because that means then I believe that I think Karlaftis is gone.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think he's your starting edge in 2026. Yeah.
Yeah. I think he's one of your 3 starting ends in 2026. Again, just kind of like, obviously you're starting 2 ends in all likelihood, but I think your top 3 guys there are probably your big. I think he is sharing that role with someone, and George Karlaftis on the other side would be kind of my hunch there. Now you find your 2026 different position, your 2026 Jerry Tillery kind of thing, where it's like this guy's kind of bounced around a little bit, or really your Charles Omenihu from the original signing, where it's like we're going to bring in a guy who can round this out. I think that's important, because remember, again, in terms of like what we remember and don't remember from last year, it improved down the stretch a little bit. The pass rush was not good enough last year for long stretches. A lot of those stressful games were because Bryce Young was really comfortable. A lot of those tough stretches were, man, I've seen George Karlaftis moving some dudes here and there a little bit, but not quite getting home. I see Chris Jones getting double teamed. Can anybody win one-on-one? In this offseason, the Chiefs showed you they saw the same thing. It was where we are bringing back Omenihu, not at all costs, but at that cost. We are going to still have Mike Dana in this mix. You hope both of those guys are healthy throughout 2025. I think I drew the comparison with Tranquil and Dana earlier. Next year, Mike Dana's contract, his cap hits over $11 million, and it would take him $2 million to cut him. I just don't think he's on the team next year at that number. So I think Gillotte is taking Mike Dana's role in 2026. If he's more than that, fabulous. If he continues to grow from that, fabulous. I also do think it's a chance that it's Mike Dana in 2026, and then it's George Karlaftis later on in that rookie deal, just because I think Karlaftis' market's going to be fascinating. He's too good to ever get him at a bargain, but he's not quite one of your like elite edge rushers. So I love Karlaftis as a player. He's going to get paid. I'm glad for somebody to pay him. I don't know if it's going to be able to be the Chiefs, depending on they're paying Trey Smith, they're paying Nick Bolton, and they're going to end up paying Trent McDuffie, I think. So those young guys getting new deals. I don't know where Karlaftis is going to be on that line.
Yeah, I've talked about it a while, and I don't want to necessarily get into it all right now, because we'll have the whole, I guess, next year even.
So much time, dude. We have so many shows before there's football.
But I've done a lot of soul searching on this one, and I find it hard for the Chiefs to move on for Karlaftis for a multitude of reasons. Although I do understand if he gets 14 sacks this year, 13 sacks this year, some team's going to overpay, and the Chiefs won't be able to be players in that. But if he ends up with 8 or 9 again this year, you're sitting there going, okay, I could see the Chiefs being very competitive. And if you're very competitive, not some drastic overpay, not the Panthers with 3 for 54 for Turk, but it's going to be more than that for Karlaftis, obviously.
Yeah, and he's so easy to pay. Think about being Mike Borgonzi in Tennessee and thinking, man, I'd really like to have a defensive end who I know I can build around for the next 5 years. No questions asked. He's going to play every single football game for these 4 or 5 years. And he'll be a culture fit, and he's won championships. And it's going to be really, really, really easy for a team to give George Karlaftis a lot of money. And he deserves it.
Hear me out. Oh my gosh, I gotta look this up.
Okay.
Is some team gonna pay him like the Chiefs paid, I guess, and traded for Frank Clark? Is that the comp? Because I think Karlaftis,
that made my heart sink. That was interesting. That's an interesting one, man.
Frank Clark. Let me look up his numbers.
And that contract is no longer being accepted, by the way, in the current market. You're gonna have to add some inflation to that deal.
Man, that's close. First 3 years for Frank Clark, 3, 10, 9. First 3 years for Karlaftis, 6, 10 and a half, 8.
Yeah.
Then the fourth year, though, was when Frank Clark had his 13 sack season at his age 25 year.
Frank Clark never did it on the biggest stages that Karlaftis has done it on, by the way.
Correct. But he was 25. Karlaftis is a year younger. I think that Frank Clark deal, by the way, is, and again, you're going to add some money to it because of the way the edge rusher has gone, but I think you're right. I think Karlaftis, the culture fit, at the time you knew he was going to be on the field. We didn't know about the stomach issue all the time with Frank Clark and how that transpired later on in his career. But man, I think that's a good point you brought up. And that the Frank Clark
he's
deal,
$25 million a year, man. Like, I think that's the starting point for George Karlaftis right now.
yeah.
And again, not an insult. I wouldn't call a team stupid for paying him that. The Chiefs are just in a really tough spot. And again, like, not to bring up another old rotting horse to beat for the last minute or two before this show's over tonight. But if you're paying Nick Bolton, you're probably not paying George Karlaftis. Like, that's kind of one of the choices you're making, because I think McDuffie clears both of them. You are asking Steve Spagnuolo who's more important to you, who's more important to your defense. And I believe that he would say Nick Bolton. I would disagree, but I would believe that he would say that. And your answer now is you draft Gillotte, you continue to invest in defensive end, you hope Felix takes one of those steps. It's interesting. I don't know. I think it's fun.
Perpetual Nick Bolton hater because he hates smart football guys because Brisco apparently all of a sudden
is what I just said wrong? You've only got so much money. You want to pay Nick Bolton $20 million per? Be my guest.
It wasn't $20 million per.
25.
It wasn't that.
30.
What are you, an auctioneer? 25 now, 25 now, 25.
I would never bring auctioneer energy to a show hosted by you. I know my place on that one.
All right, let's get out of here before Brisco says anything else mean about Nick Bolton.
$45 million a year for Nick Bolton is too much.
So positive until Brisco had to come around. No, I think it's a good conversation. We'll have some more Nick Bolton, Trent McDuffie, Karlaftis contract conversations as the season progresses. Obviously, don't forget about Trey Smith thrown in there as well. But a long off season. And it's fun because we're with you guys. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. A lot of fun. If you didn't give us a like, give us a review. We'd really, really appreciate it. Wherever you get your podcast, preferably Apple as well, reviews there because I can read those. I don't know how to read reviews anywhere else besides Apple. That's not a you issue. That's a me issue. I'm not technologically savvy. I'm 31 going on, 91. Brisco will be back on with KCSN. Only Weird Games in about a half hour-ish. Half hour to 45 minutes knowing him.
It's not, hey, knowing the show.
Appreciate
I have by
Richard.
far the least false starts on that show.
Appreciate Richard doing everything behind the glass as well. Thank you for everyone hanging out here. Appreciate. Obviously, we got a new one here. We got Buck and Bob Take on Chiefs Kingdom podcast. Appreciate you hanging out. You were great all chat long as well. Glad you found us. Appreciate Steve Slothy, everyone who hangs out with us every single week. Until next time, we are out.